This book had just told me that not only is dairy not good for us, but it's actually disease promoting. So in one afternoon, I've learned I shouldn't be drinking milk because it's not good for me. I love animals, and yet, when I consume milk, I'm hurting them. And this planet that I love living on so much, I'm damaging it, when I buy and drink milk. And that really set off this identity in me that I want to live by my ethics. I want to eat in line with my ethics. And I immediately began to identify as a plant-based eater, and in a very short period of time, I had cut out all animal ingredients and just thrived on a plant-based diet.
I'm Dr. Larry Burchett, and as I see every day in the ER, life can change in a moment. Here on this show, we tell the stories that matter most, after which we are never the same. I am very excited today to have a good friend of mine as our guest, Miss Caroline Love, food activist.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Larry.
So glad you're here. Have fun.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Since we talked about you coming on the show, I've been wondering and waiting.
Yeah.
What is your moment? What are you going to talk about?
Oh, I love thinking back to this moment. It feels like so long ago, and yet it impacts my day every single day. We have to rewind 20 years, though, for me to tell you my moment, and it's really a two-parter. So if you rewind to where I grew up in the Deep South, in a tiny town in South Carolina, I was a 15-year-old girl, and like so many girls that age, struggling to find, health and wellness and figure out, what we are supposed to eat to be our best selves. Mm-hmm. And then a book dropped in my hands that I read, and it absolutely changed everything. And then fast forward a few years later, the information that was in that book had a huge impact on my family and my beloved grandmother, who ended up passing away from a food-related disease.
Oh.
And through that death, it set off the rest of my life, my career, my activism, and the reason that I wake up every single day.
Oh my goodness. This sounds huge. So it sounds like a two-parter. So
Yeah.
Take me into this book, and before you get into the book, tell me a little more about 15-year-old Caroline Love.
Yeah.
This is in South Carolina.
Yeah, Summerville, South Carolina, tiny little town, 20 years ago. Not Los Angeles, where we're sitting today.
No kidding.
But I was, like a lot of girls, trying to understand what society was feeding me in terms of how I was supposed to look and what I had to eat to look a certain way. And I had grown up in, an area of the country that consumed, in my opinion, almost mindlessly, fried chicken and country fried steak, macaroni and cheese. I ate bacon and eggs for breakfast. This wasn't questioned.
This is what you grew up eating.
100%.
Yeah.
Standard American diet, which, of course, stands for SAD, Standard American Diet. And that was very normal. That was absolutely the norm. And then through this, journey that is life, a family friend came through, stayed at our house when I was about 15 years old, and this is pre-iPads, pre-Kindles, and she left a stack of books behind on the kitchen counter. And I was a voracious reader, and I remember going outside in the backyard and reading through these books that summer. And one of these books was about the food that we eat and how that connects to the diseases that our bodies get. And the author was talking about meats and dairy and eggs, and there was a line in this book about dairy, and she called it bovine slime.
Oh, wow.
And to take you back again, I despised dairy. I remember
From the beginning.
From before. Like you hear a lot of people say, I didn't like dairy.
Yeah.
But if you can think back to the 90s, there was this television commercial with these supermodels wriggling around on screen with the milk mustaches. And the last scene of this commercial was Black with a glass of milk. And they tie a tape measure around the waist of the glass of milk. And the not so subtle message that women are supposed to receive from watching this commercial.
You'll be thin if you drink milk.
You'll be a thin, tall, beautiful model if you consume dairy products. And then, of course, the fine print at the bottom of these commercials is this commercial is sponsored by the dairy lobby, which is one of the most dangerous and powerful lobbies in the United States. And, long story short, of course, I found out that those commercials are lying to people. But I was consuming this information. Society was feeding, young girls this myth. And I would go to the fridge and I would plug my nose and I would chug a glass of milk.
I absolutely distinctly remember milk commercials targeting young boys. And instead of the waist going thinner, it was to be muscular. And it was the football player thing. And it was the milk commercial where the puny guy, as a 5th grader, drinks milk, and then, but I'm drinking milk and I'm getting stronger, and he gets like I don't know, when he's a freshman or something, some guys just bully over him, and then he's a senior and he walks out of the locker room, this ripped stud, and he slams into them. He's like, "Pardon me, guys." I don't know if you remember that commercial. I'll never forget that commercial. And the message, similarly, which was so on brand, was you want to be a man, you want to be a muscular stud, whatever, drink milk, right? Milk does a body.
Marketing is
it was brilliant.
Powerful.
Very powerful.
Tool.
I never forgot that.
Especially when we're young and impressionable, these things really sink into our identity, our psyche.
I want to be like that guy.
Of course, absolutely. And society is telling us we need to look this way. And so then, when I got this book in my hands and it refers to milk as bovine slime and interspecies adult breastfeeding, and it's telling me that milk is not meant for my body, I'm like, wait a second, this can't be right. I've been lied to my entire life. Like that, I need to confirm this. I've always been very, curious.
Yeah.
And I remember receiving this information and running upstairs to our old, dial-up internet computer, super slow.
America Online.
Probably America Online. Probably pre-Google. This is 20 years ago. AskJeeves.com, and I type in the question, is it true that cow's milk is for baby cows and not for human beings? Hashtag duh now, but at the time, this was brand new information.
Yeah.
And then this next part, still to this day, is such a visceral memory in my mind. A video starts downloading. I've clicked, a link.
This is when you're Googling to try to, you're whatever that website was.
AskJeeves.com.
When you're Jeevesing, is this true?
Yeah. And I click a link and a video pops up, and it's a mother cow and the baby boy calf that she's just birthed. And, because the dairy industry runs off of impregnating female cows to, milk them, this baby boy is not needed in the dairy industry. So he's being taken to a veal crate where he will live a very short life and then become veal.
Ew.
And this mother cow in this video is bellowing out for her baby that's being ripped from her. And the reason this memory, I think, in some ways is so visceral, was not only was it incredibly painful to watch and realize the torture that occurs for these sentient beings in the food system, but I started to connect the dots on how this impacts our planet. Animal agriculture is the biggest chunk of greenhouse gas emissions being the #1 cause of climate change, which is, resulting in degradation to our planet. And this book had just told me that not only is dairy not good for us, but it's actually disease promoting. So in one afternoon, I've learned I shouldn't be drinking milk because it's not good for me. I love animals, and yet, when I consume milk, I'm hurting them. And this planet that I love living on so much, I'm damaging it, when I buy and drink milk. And that really set off this identity in me that I want to live by my ethics. I want to eat in line with my ethics. And I immediately began to identify as a plant-based eater, and in a very short period of time, I had cut out all animal ingredients and just thrived on a plant-based diet. I, lost the little bit of dairy weight that I was carrying as a young teenager. My energy improved as a teenager. My skin cleared up. I remember my grades going up. But more than any of all of those benefits, I just felt like I was eating in line with my values. And it was just one of the most powerful moments that ultimately set off the rest of my life.
Wow. So this happened, it started with that book that you kind of chance happened to open. I mean, there were 6 books there and you picked this one out of those.
Yeah.
Did a little bit of research, found out some things, and then made a big change in your life that quite a trajectory since then. You mentioned your grandmother, did you say? And you said that was part of the story too. I'm in the setting that this happened. Tell me a little bit more, especially now that you are a conscious grown woman. What is it like to be a teenage girl in this country?
Oh my gosh, fantastic question. And I'm sure, every woman that was a teenage girl has a different answer. I think it's a lot harder today for, young girls with social media and, the pressure of that belief that you need to have a spotlight on you through social media and constantly be updating and have this persona. I'm sure that makes it a lot more challenging because I remember, it being hard enough to go to 6th grade without Facebook or Instagram and just having to wear, the right cut jeans. As silly as that sounds, I mean, that is the most important thing when you're 12 and trying to fit in, with a community in middle school or high school, because your experience is so limited. You've only lived 12 years, and so of course something silly becomes the most important thing because you haven't had a lifetime of experience to realize, the other suffering and the other problems in the world.
Put it in perspective.
To put it in perspective, yeah. So I'm sure teenage boys, have, very similar struggles in that capacity. But as a teenage girl, I can say it's challenging, and I don't envy, the young people coming up today with the spotlight of social media.
God, I think about my daughter. She's 9. I think I'm not going to get into what it was like to be a teenage boy or junior high boy, but I don't think I was conscious. Just like the story of the milk commercial. I can look back and now reflect on and be like, you know what, that did affect my behavior. Yeah. And I just bought it. I just was, but I wasn't consciously aware of, oh yeah, I want to be like that. I'm going to do that, like the impact of that media on, you're developing this sense of self and relationship to your changing body and all this stuff. And anyway, my point was, that wasn't even on my radar. Now I think we can see this as conscious adults, and it's like, it really makes you ask the question, what are the messages? What are we teaching these children? What are they receiving, and how are they going through all that, and it mattering? Okay, so you read this book, you do some of your research, you change your eating pretty drastically. Would you use the word vegan? Did you become vegan at 15?
Yeah.
You said plant-based.
In hindsight, I look back and I call myself plant-based because I, almost immediately stopped consuming animals or animal products. It's interesting if you do look at the differences between somebody that calls himself a plant-based eater and a vegan. A vegan really does take it to the next level of consciousness around not just the food I'm consuming, but am I wearing animals? Am I wearing, cowskin boots, or am I wearing, a sheepskin wool sweater? How else can I be really thoughtful around what I consume and who I'm consuming and whose skin and fur I'm purchasing? So that took a few more years for me, and
I see. So you were plant-based at 15, but maybe you wore leather or so, belt shoes, whatever, and it's how relevant now. You're in town in Los Angeles for a vegan fashion show.
Yeah. We were just talking about the LA Vegan Fashion Show just this past week in Los Angeles. Incredible designers from all over the globe. A woman from Paris, France, who's been in the fashion industry her entire career, who's started this around her ethics of encouraging people to make better conscious choices around fashion, and really the same problems that I've shared that are in the food industry. Human health epidemics related to our food choices, animals suffering in this unnecessary system, degradation on our planet. Those same problems exist in the fashion industry as well.
Interesting.
Fashion is one of the biggest polluters to our planet outside of the food industry. The leather industry, with the chemicals that are used to dye and tan these cow skins, that's affecting you when you buy and wear those products. That's affecting the people that are in those factories. They're doing that day after day after day, and then obviously the animals caught and trapped in the system as well. So that's another area that's important to think about and talk about. For me, I try to focus on doing the most good that I can within the food industry, but I was able to talk about how that connects with vegan fashion at Vegan Fashion Week this week. Yeah.
So when you say vegan fashion, so what kind of thing? So no furs, no leathers. What else does that encompass? I don't know.
Yeah, so feathers from birds, skins from anything, from cows to any other skins that are used, crocodile skin.
Oh, snake skin, yeah.
Snake skin, exactly. Fur, is used from a number of different animals, including dogs and cats. People don't realize when they're buying, furs, especially in fast fashion, that dog and cat fur they can test this and actually find dog and cat fur. So we as a society,
it's a little disturbing.
It's really interesting, how we as a society decide which animals are okay to eat, which animals are okay to wear, and which animals we love. So, we as Westerners would never eat or wear a dog in good conscience. But in different parts of the world,
China,
it's very normalized that dog is a delicacy, cat is a delicacy. And it's complicated to talk about, but I think there's even racism tied up in this conversation, because
how so?
What makes a dog different than a pig? We're eating pigs in America, which is very normal. We're wearing cows in America, which is very normal here. It's not necessary, it's not needed, but what makes a pig who's smarter than a dog okay to eat, but not a dog? My argument is we don't need or shouldn't be eating either of them, but when people point the finger at countries in Asia that do still practice this custom, point that out with rightful rage and anger. I like to say, what's different about the dog?
Oh, I see, the racist kind of Chinese kind of different versus
shaming one culture.
Oh, they
for
eat dogs
eating
just
this
like
animal.
we eat pigs.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah. We should look here first about our own conscious choices before we point the fingers at others.
So, I am almost afraid to ask about your grandma.
Well, it's something that I, look back on with a lot of sadness in so many ways, and in other ways, gratitude. Because without, a hard experience, something might not ignite within you. So a few years after, baby Caroline, 15-year-old Caroline, had changed her own life.
Baby Caroline.
I always say baby vegan, now 20 years later.
Teenage Caroline. The beginning, I see, baby vegan
Baby
Caroline.
vegan Caroline. I always say baby vegan Caroline wouldn't believe.
Newborn Caroline, newly converted, post-baptism. Okay.
But yeah, as a 15-year-old, going vegan, really changing my own life and my own identity and the way I operated in the world. A few years after that, my beloved grandmother was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And, as we know conclusively today, the World Health Organization came out with a report in 2015 undeniably showing that meat causes cancer. We know that today. There have always been reports that have pointed in that direction, but in 2015, the World Health Organization said this. And yet, our media still allows debate to go, on in this area, and society remains confused about this. But, we know from the top health organization in our country and in other countries, meat causes cancer, and stomach cancer specifically has been shown to be a direct result of processed meat. And I remember, growing up, being with Nana. She was a very special figure in my life in many ways. She was my unofficial caregiver, and a woman that has an incredible life story, and I think that I got a lot of my zest for life and adventurous spirit. I just really think she is within me in a lot of ways.
You're very close to her.
Very, very close to her, very close to her. And I remember her diet from having, been raised in rural South Carolina, born in the middle of the Great Depression. Mom died giving birth to her. Her father left to raise, a number of other children. Nana was passed around. Uncle, aunt, cousin, whoever had an extra bed could feed an extra mouth. So this was not a life of privilege where she was given an education around healthy food. She was eating whatever was necessary to survive.
Survival.
So I have a lot of empathy when I talk about this. It was a very different life and childhood than my own. But the fact remains, what we feed our body, that's what we become. And she ate a lot of processed meat throughout her life, and very sadly that resulted in a stomach cancer diagnosis when I was in my late teens. And I watched her waste away and eventually die. I was going into my junior year of college. I was weeks away from turning 21. And hard to talk about just all of the ramifications of someone who loves you that much dying too young. For me, being at a really pivotal place in my life, on the cusp of college graduation and the rest of my life. And, Nana financially supported me in many ways.
Oh, wow.
So that was, a moment that really affected me. And I, same thing, one of those visceral memories in your brain. I remember thinking, I know that her food choices, not her fault, but they led to her diagnosis and death. If I can prevent this, anyone else from watching a loved one go through this themselves, or watching a loved one suffer through a disease that doesn't have to happen. We've almost normalized cancer and heart disease and diabetes in our society. And I know you as a doctor see this every day. It's not normal to get heart disease in your 50s or 60s. That is disease-promoting food, which is animal foods. It's not normal. We don't have to suffer through disease.
Pathology.
Yeah. So when
However
I realized
common
that,
it may be,
yeah. And I didn't immediately make food my career. I was going into a different field, but not too many years later, I realized this was too important. And if I was going to do anything in my life, I was going to use every ounce of energy and passion for helping people, making this world a better place through joyful, delicious, healthy, energizing foods, and help animals and our planet at the same time.
Sounds like that's where that mission was really born. You had this initial experience, and then later it just got added so much personal meaning in losing your grandmother. How old was your grandma when she passed?
Nana was 78 when she passed.
How long was she sick?
She was sick for about 2 years. Yeah, really hard way.
Cancer.
Really hard way to watch someone go.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
It's, I'm trying to imagine, you when you're in that moment and you lose somebody, and just that experience. I'm thinking about my own mother. She died when she was 48 of kidney cancer, and it was like,
so sorry.
And it was like, what could have been done? What could we have done? Because you don't want to, you'd do anything,
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember that time? 2 years.
Yes and no. I think it's such a traumatic experience.
It's absolutely a trauma.
Especially for a young person.
And you said she was like, you were closer to her than your own mother?
Yeah.
So this is like your mother.
Yeah, very hard death, very hard death.
I didn't know that. You and I share that in common.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you get through it and life goes on. It sticks with you. And
it's the worst.
I don't wish it on anybody, obviously. And I think that's where the gratitude comes from, because, you were strong enough to get through your mother's death, and that may have, created something in you that makes you a better doctor and more empathetic for people that you interact with every single day. And, with Nana, something that I feel really strongly about in my work in food is, I get so angry when I see the milk commercials or the McDonald's commercials, or, these, commercials saying that chicken is healthy. These are, lies that lobby groups are feeding us. But what I don't get angry at is the individuals who, just like me, ate up the marketing, just like my grandmother, who maybe didn't have another choice. If you eat, beans and rice and vegetables, it is not expensive to go fully plant-based, but there is, a myth that eating vegan is more expensive. So for people that don't understand how to buy ingredients and how to cook, and they think they can't afford it, I don't get angry at those people, because I think about my grandmother, who didn't have a choice but to eat whatever was given to her to survive. And that's why, my future career now, moving into the future after my own change and watching.
Well, don't spill those beans, because you didn't. There's an interesting part of this.
Spill the beans, pun intended.
Sometimes I do brilliant things I don't even know what I'm doing. You didn't go. You're a food and animal activist now. You didn't go right into that. It's not like
No.
you lost your grandmother, big epiphany. This is my mission, which it sounds like you're describing. That those seeds were planted,
Incubated.
Yeah, that years later, you became a journalist.
Yeah.
This is what you went to college for, and then so there's a little bit of I don't know, not U-turn, but for you to get to where you are now.
Yeah.
So what happened there? How did you? So what got you into journalism? It seems very different than what we're talking about now.
Yeah, it's interesting to think back. I think life, can only be understood backwards, but can only be lived forwards. What got me to journalism? Passion from a young age. I had done, journalism in school from a very young age. Worked on our TV programs in elementary school and in high school. I really got the bug for, asking big questions and telling stories, meeting people. I love human beings. I think we're fascinating in so many ways. And so I totally caught the bug, went to college for it. And I think I was already on the trajectory to go into journalism when, food changed everything. And then I got, a journalism job out of school. I got a job that a 21-year-old probably shouldn't have been given. I was anchoring and reporting in a station in the state capital of South Carolina.
Oh, well, right out of college.
Right out of college.
Well, good for you.
Yeah. And what that job taught me is, how to question authority. I'm interviewing politicians and government officials and, the police department and, asking big questions and solving, these, questions in our community. And I think that you don't understand it when it's happening at the time, but you can look back and see that, challenging authority, asking questions to authority, getting answers for who, you're accountable to, your viewers, your audience.
Yeah.
It really does tie into my work as a food activist now, because we do have to challenge what the government is telling us is okay for us to consume. We do have to challenge these big food companies as they're putting out the next, cheese stuffed pizza, whatever, that's harming us. Instead of just accepting that, we have to challenge that and work to do better for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think it ties in, but only in hindsight. I didn't know that this would happen.
You're
one
living
day.
it and it's evolving.
But what I understand now, and what I really encourage young people, and I love mentorship, because I would have loved a mentor to tell me this when I was starting out in my career. Follow your passion. Whatever that is, whatever you think about every moment of the day, what you wake up excited about. And for me, that was, healthy food and leading a healthy life. And I love food, and food can be so joyful, especially when it promotes health and, again, in line with your ethics. Most of the stories that I wanted to cover as a journalist were about food and animals. And when my news director would send me out on what she thought were stories about animals, if it's the circus or the zoo, animals in captivity, that's not what I was talking about. I wanted to cover.
You're going to go there and find a story.
Something different. And so I eventually recognized that I could not lead the rest of my life doing something that was not promoting my passion and in line with my ethics. So
do you remember, can you have an example of a specific story where they're like, hey, Caroline, go do a story on this, and you went there and you're like, I'm going to find this, and you kind of found a story more with an angle or in line with things you were passionate about?
I'll tell you, as soon as you ask that question, what pops into my brain, I was the morning show anchor. We had a daily morning show, and I had to
9 a.m. or something.
Roll into the station at like 4 a.m. I was on the desk at 6 a.m. Camera goes on, and you're anchoring for 3 hours, and long, long days. As a rookie, journalist, I'm the youngest one in the newsroom, so I get the assignments that I'm given, right, and no questions asked. And on this morning show, we had special guests come on, and we had cooking segments. And I remember it must have been Thanksgiving or Christmas. It was the holidays.
They're going to bring all these animals and turkeys and bacon and stuff out there.
You can see where this is going, right?
I kind of want to watch that episode and just watch your face.
Pre-YouTube, thank God.
Zoom in more on Caroline right now. She's reaching for a barf bag.
But there was a really, well-known, admired chef in our community. And again, not a bad guy. I'm convinced that, human beings are good. So I want to be clear that I don't fault him. He, found joy in his career, but he was a chef. And his name, he called himself Chef Fatback. And he was our special guest one morning on the morning show, and I was assigned as the anchor to do this cooking segment with him. And I just remember being hands deep in macaroni and cheese that we're cooking up on the morning show.
Could be worse. Or not? Was that like the worst?
But if you go back to that
to your
visceral
milk,
memory,
your, what did you call it, slime?
The mother cow bellowing out.
Oh, you connected it right to, that's the milk cow, I see.
Over and over in my brain. It's just always there when I see dairy. And then I think about my grandmother, people.
Oh my God, you connect those dots like
It's
that.
just the way my brain operates. It's
like
just
these traumas.
yeah. And I thought, this is something that I think about a lot. We're each given power in different ways, whether it's physical strength or we have a platform of some sort. We each have an individual power, and I feel really strongly about myself and encouraging others to use their power for good in whatever way that they can. Just make sure that you're using that power for good. And in that moment, I realized that my energy, my time, was being used to, in some way, shape, or form, encourage my audience, these people that, admire my work and, turn to me every day as the person that comes into their home to report the news. I have a standard of, not delivering them something that's going to hurt them, but doing the best that I possibly can for them. And in that moment, I felt like I couldn't promote disease through this type of food. And, hindsight again, 2020, what I didn't do was, ask to do more segments about veganism, about plant-based eating. I don't know if society was ready for that at that time. 15 years later,
probably not.
The world has changed. We've now got Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods and all of these amazing plant-based options in fast food joints, Burger King. I mean, this was not even on the radar 15, 20 years ago. Come a long way. So, for me, I knew in that moment I had to put my energy into, pushing this movement forward. And so I stepped away from my career as a journalist.
Was that really a moment? Was that where you're like, it sounds like you felt compromised.
Yeah.
It's
a great
felt
word.
Morally compromised. This was an
describe
integrity issue.
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Probably at that time you couldn't even say, yo, I'm not doing any more of these X, Y, and Z things. I just can't. Can we work with that? But you went a different direction altogether.
Yeah. For me, I felt like, I wanted to be I knew this was the future. From the first moment that I read that book that woke me up around, what is the food that should be fueling our bodies for better, I knew that this was the future, and I wanted to build that future. And so, the steps that happened after, hands deep in that bovine slime.
This is another, as you dig into this, this is a very vivid, intense memory for you in that.
Yeah, I mean, you can still feel it. You can feel what it feels like to have your hands.
It's very visceral, tactile.
Totally.
Thing.
And so, the
powerful memory.
Steps after that were, transitioning my career and transitioning my life, leaving South Carolina, which, is where I grew up, where I, was given foods that I had moved away from, and I decided to, leave the safety net of home and move to California, which is...
Is this where you came?
This is when I moved to San Francisco.
How long were you a journalist out of college to what I'm going to call the macaroni moment?
Just under 5 years.
Okay, that's a good chunk of time.
Yeah, so, I always say really grateful for that opportunity, because I think an experience like that does give you a set of skills that's going to help you in other areas of your career and in your life.
My next question is, so what is somebody who's passionate about food activism, what do you do after you leave I mean, you were an anchor.
Yeah.
You're not leaving an unsuccessful career. Where do you go next?
Yeah. I asked myself that question.
You lived that question.
Yeah, literally. And, it's a journey. It doesn't happen immediately. But in my mind, I didn't know any other vegans at that point. That didn't exist in South Carolina, to my knowledge. Now, I'm sure.
Did you feel weird or alone?
I think I was made to feel weird, if that makes sense.
Others tried to
I mean, again, remember,
vegan shame you.
15-year-old girl in, Somerville, South Carolina,
You're in the South.
all of a sudden comes to school one day and she's not eating what everybody else is eating, and I'm making my own food. And yeah, I mean,
Was that a peer thing in high school? It was hard for you, food-wise?
Oh my gosh.
I didn't even think of that.
Oh my gosh. I remember finding places to eat alone just so that I wouldn't have to deal with the bullies, the mean comments from kids. And we know, I mean, this is, I don't want to make myself out to be a victim, obviously, things have worked out pretty well in terms of the world going vegan.
Yeah, but that still sucks.
But at the time, it was really painful because as a teenager, you want nothing more than to fit in and be normal.
Oh, totally.
And it's some of the comments. Yeah, you do. You remember that.
What comments?
Oh gosh, I mean, kids are they're just mean. But I'll tell you one of the interesting things, and I knocked on social media early, so I'll say, a couple things with social media today. This is, one of the things that I believe has normalized, delicious plant-based eating, because influencers are showcasing their beautiful food on Instagram and on Facebook, and
been a good thing for the movement.
Information sharing, and people are now aware of what's happening to animals, trapped in our food system in these factory farms. So you can't hide information when you've got social media. So it's really great in that capacity. And what was I going to say about social media?
You were saying good things that kind of help the movement for social media.
And now we've got Facebook where we get to stay in touch with everybody and their brother from every stage of our life, and it's been so beautiful to start to see posts from people that I went to school with.
Old bullies.
From young ages, friends from college, people at all stages of my life who I honestly would have never thought that they would have opened up to a different way of eating. These are, athletes, baseball players, football players from high school and college that are now posting on social media how they are transitioning away from meat, dairy, and eggs and eating a plant-focused diet because it reduces inflammation. It allows them to maintain a healthy body weight. They watched a family member, have a heart attack and, woke up to what is health-promoting food and what's disease-promoting food. So the world is changing, the world is shifting, and so I really focus on, the positive of that journey, and try to forgive people from the mean comments in the past.
There's so many things I wish I could see. One of them being this macaroni moment of you on TV, but almost another one of playing the flashback to you as a high school kid at some lunch counter. Somebody's talking trash or bully, whatever, and then fast forward to now or recently where this person either has disease, where they're diabetic, they're suffering with it.
Which I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Come on, some of us like a little bit of justice. Or makes a great story. Or they go vegan now, and you know what I mean? Just I think that word is vindication. I like that story.
Yeah. Well, and I want the positive.
Are we going to explode? Okay. It's cool. I'll project you. I'll jump in.
Well, and to bounce off of what you're saying, I really want the positive outcome of that. I think, a lot of my activism did start from, having a deep love of animals at a young age. My sister and I were like the neighborhood rescuers, rescuing cats and dogs and owls, and my sister had a rescue snake. I mean, we just, we loved animals. But really, once I started to understand, veganism, it's as much for human beings and our fellow human beings as it is for the animals trapped in this system. Humans are victim to the food system too. Again, the marketing that these food companies are trying to literally shove down our throats. And now, many years later, and we're all getting to certain ages where our bodies are manifesting disease, or our parents' bodies are manifesting disease related to the foods that, we've consumed throughout life. And I've watched, one too many friends and their family members, just like my grandmother, get diagnosed with something, suffer with that disease, and in too many cases die from that disease. And that's what, really fuels my activism is I don't want people that I care about to lose loved ones unnecessarily. It doesn't have to be that way.
There's the recent study this year that finally identified the number one cause of disease, death, and morbidity and mortality, we call it death and disease. It's not smoking anymore, it's food.
It's food.
It's true.
It's food.
Okay, so you get this mission, and it bubbles up and surfaces, the macaroni moment. You're like, I'm leaving journalism. What happened next? I know where you're at now. We're friends. I know, you're at a very influential level in food, activism, and so forth. But like, what's the A to B? What is that story? Where did you start? You came to California, then what?
Yeah. Came to California, and it's just one of those things where I didn't know much at this, moment of transition. I knew enough to think, well, this plant-based food thing, it's not happening in South Carolina that I can find, but in my mind, it's happening in California. I had been to California once at that age, and I just had this in my mind that it was, a mecca for all things health and wellness. And I landed in San Francisco, and I just started, seeking out other people like me. I started going to events and, started meeting other, vegans and vegetarians and food activists and just some really incredible organizations that are not just focused on the animals, but focused on, the human beings, oftentimes immigrants, trapped working in these factory farms. So I started to connect with what I call my people now. And I ended up connecting with one of the early companies in the space, ended up getting a job at this company, and was there for 5 years. I helped to build one of the early alternative protein companies in the space, one of the fastest growing companies in the space. Learned a lot. It's a roller coaster of a ride when you're working for a startup. And
so you got started in the startup kind of vegan food space.
Yes.
Food production.
Yes.
That was like, came to San Francisco, made some connections, and got that job opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. So learned a lot, doing that job. And after 5 years, helping to build this company.
So you did that for 5 years. Okay.
Yeah, I knew that other companies were starting in this space. We had a lot of money moving into the space, a lot of investment dollars, a lot of entrepreneurs also passionate about food and plant-based food, recognizing it as a solution to human health epidemics, recognizing it as a solution to climate change, and this is really starting to happen. And for me, the movement, quite literally, and what I became passionate about was taking my expertise from helping to build one company that literally rode that roller coaster that is a startup, and moving into the plant-based food space as a growth consultant, quite literally helping other plant-based food companies grow as fast as possible, in a sustainable, financially sustainable, long-term way. And what my work now encompasses is any type of plant-based food related project, any way to help make sure that our governments are promoting plant-based and not subsidizing what's happening today. The government subsidizes the foods that are disease promoting, animal meat, dairy, eggs. As consumption, drops off, farmers are still producing at the same level because.
How do we get off of that?
Call your elected representatives and tell them that you do not
Good old democracy.
want subsidies going into disease-promoting food, but moving subsidies to the food that's actually going to heal disease.
I mean, it's one thing to say let the market decide; it's another to subsidize it like that, right?
You're exactly right. Yeah, and this should really anger every single taxpayer. Why do you want that piece of steak or that piece of chicken that's filled with hormones, antibiotics, that's causing climate change, that's hurting animals, that's hurting humans? Why do you want your tax dollars going to that being fed to our children in the school system instead of something that's going to build, healthy brains and strong bodies and a better future for our country and other countries.
I think the food answer. Oh my God, it's just so pervasive. But the food answer is, from a political standpoint, is you got to take the big tobacco playbook, because in the U.S. we want that so many things change with that, and you have to use the same thing.
I absolutely scoff.
That's the playbook.
When you say that, a film that I know you've seen that's launching on Netflix on October 16th. It's called The Game Changers.
Yeah, so tell me about some of the things you've been working, because you had a big part in this.
Yes, this has been just probably one of the most joyful things that I've been lucky enough to be a part of. This is a documentary that's been 6 years in the making.
Oh, wow.
James Cameron, Susie Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger, some of the top athletes from around the globe are in this film. James Cameron, Susie Cameron being our executive producing team with some other amazing folks. Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a big role in the film.
Oh, I remember Arnie. I've seen the clips. Yep.
And the premise of the film is disrupting the most dangerous myth in history, and that is, to be a big, strong, powerful athlete, you need to consume a lot of meat. And what we know is that's false information. And what the film does is it walks you through a number of the strongest and most powerful athletes from around the globe who are all fueling their victories through plant-based eating, combined with the latest science and medical information that again shows that not only can you be just as good of an athlete on a plant-based diet, but because of the inflammation and the other negative factors associated with animal foods, you will actually have a competitive advantage as an athlete by eating a plant-based diet. And there's some fascinating, individual studies throughout this documentary, including, 3 young male athletes, and they're given a meat-based meal, and then the firmness and frequency of their erections are measured. And then the next day, they're given one plant-based meal.
The bean burrito.
Exactly.
I remember.
So it's the same meal. The only thing that's swapped out is the source of protein. So animal protein versus a plant-based protein. And I don't want to ruin the punchline for your viewers, but the bottom line is, because of blood flow and oxygen being restricted when you're on a heavy animal food diet, you will have stronger erections and a better sex life on a plant-based diet. Even if it's just one plant-based meal, you will notice the difference in your body's function.
It's hard to forget that part of the movie with these young men and the 3 of them with the difference in the erections. The scientist in me is very curious about that. I will say the Arnold's, what do you call it when somebody shows up and
Cameo.
Arnold's cameo.
Yeah.
That's also memorable. I mean, you said the myth is to be a strong athlete, you have to eat meat. I would even go a deep layer and say that for a lot of us, especially men, it's like, to be a man, you got to eat meat. I think that's part of the myth that you're debunking.
Yeah.
And to include Arnold, who with these movies was so influential, was just a brilliant way to bring him in, especially because he's had heart disease. He used steroids, and there's various other reasons, and how he changed his own diet. But the scene that I won't forget that really, and this is anecdote, this isn't like science, but it's an impressive movie to put it forth like that, was one of the world's strongest man competitors who changed to a plant-based, I don't know if is he vegan or just plant, I don't remember.
Vegan. Patrick Boboiman from Germany.
And then he talks about how his strength went up.
Yeah.
That's a great anecdotal example of, well, he cut out the meat, whatever, and this fear of, oh, I'm going to be weaker, I'm going to lose muscle mass. And it's like, no, actually that didn't happen for this guy. that one, and it really does. I think it's, as a scientist, it's a documentary, but the scientist in me is like, it's just one person, but it's still to the statement, of, well, you're gonna get weaker. If you're gonna compete at that level, you got it. It's like, you don't actually. Mm-hmm. Maybe, you don't need that, and maybe you can do better on this. That one I remember, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, Patrick is an incredible, man. He is kind and gentle and cares about people, planet, and animals. And he can lift a car off the ground. Oh,
he's a monster. He's one of the monsters.
And another message in the film is, again, what are you going to do with your strength? What are you going to do with your power? What does it mean to be a man? And another reason I'm so grateful to be involved in this film is, the people who made it and who star in the film. They are just some of the most, heart-centered, kind people working to make a better planet. They care about, the health of their own bodies, but they care about people around them and the impact that they leave. And you mentioned the tobacco playbook a moment ago, and that's a big piece of this film as well. We walk through, Arnold really walks us through the marketing to men of meat, and to be a big, strong man, you've got to eat that quarter pounder, with your hot rod car and the chick in a bikini, it's tied to your masculinity.
Absolutely.
And it's killing you. Men are victims of the food industry. And that's what, Arnold talks about, and, really, and in so many ways has changed his own life, through his own, struggles with health and well-being and wanting to live a long, healthy life.
Longevity, yeah.
But you can tie that directly back to the playbook of the tobacco industry. This confusion in the science and in the literature. We knew that smoking caused cancer, and yet doctors were putting commercials. This one has a filter on it. It's safe to. Doctors smoke this cigarette because it's safe. And athletes were used in marketing. Babe Ruth was used in marketing of cigarettes.
Is that right?
This footage is all in the film, showing that this playbook of pushing cigarettes using doctors and celebrities.
Wow.
We now have that same playbook in our broken food system, where doctors will get on TV and say, oh yes, some of these studies show this, but we don't really know yet if, when, no, the World Health Organization has said, we absolutely know that meat and animal products are not health promoting foods. And then athletes, you still see athletes in the McDonald's commercials. But what's really amazing about this film is, athletes like Tom Brady, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like Patrick Boyman, like the Tennessee Titans. There's so many athletes out there. There's Bryant Jennings, a boxer from Philadelphia. David Carter, who's a football player, NFL player. He calls himself the 300-pound vegan. You've got these big, strong, tough athletes who are saying, we got to the championship because my team ate more plant-based meals. All of our measurables are better because Chef Charity Morgan started cooking plant-based meals for the starting lineup, and then we won, the championship. So we've got the influencers that the younger generation is going to look up to, and I am so hopeful that with the rate of increase in plant-based eating in our country, that we are going to be better off for it in the long term.
It's quite a movement. Yeah. I can see your excitement, especially with the documentary, and how fun and inspiring it must have been for you to be a part of that, and to see it finally after 6 years come to fruition.
And available for everyone. And
how can people watch that?
So right now you can download it on iTunes. In fact, we in just 9 days became the fastest selling documentary of all time on iTunes.
Oh, really?
So that's,
no kidding.
you know,
Congratulations.
an incredible feat right there for something, again, that's, you know, promoting so much good for people. And
Game Changers is on
iTunes, a number of other download services, you can find it. And then really excited, October 16th is when it will become available on Netflix, which makes it accessible to so many more people.
Is it only going to be on Netflix? It'll be on iTunes and some other places?
Yeah, so basically you'll be able to find it just about almost everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Good for you.
Thank you. Well, props go out to the incredible team, just a wonderful team, producing team. James Wilkes is one of our producers. He's an MMA fighter, and it was really his story, his personal story.
He was the center figure in the thing.
Yeah, that set this off. You know, he was an athlete that was injured, and to heal himself, he started doing his own research on, you know, what is the food that's going to fuel my body back to health? Just like the question I asked myself as a teenager, you know, what should I be feeding myself to feel a certain way and look a certain way? And James started to uncover, you know, that the Roman gladiators, some of the strongest men in history, based on, you know, bone analysis from a graveyard in Turkey, we know that the Roman gladiators ate a predominantly plant-based diet. And so James goes on this journey to find athletes and found a plethora of them, which is why it took so long to get the film out. So many athletes are going plant-based. It took years to document all of this.
I see.
And then, you know, while this documentary was being filmed and James was on his own journey, his father has a heart attack.
Oh, this happened in the middle of the...
This happened real time during the film. And, you know, again, watch the film because it's so powerful to watch.
I remember that part of it.
You know, a young man who is on his own journey and meeting other people on that journey. And then it's like everything stops when somebody you care about gets sick. And James, now having a network of, you know, the best doctors from around the planet to treat, you know, heart disease, gets his dad in touch, and, you know, this journey becomes trying to save his father's life at the same time bringing his own body back to
so
wellness
much more
and health.
meaningful, personally meaningful.
Yeah. And, you know, again, it's about, you know, better for your body, better for the planet, better for animals, using your power for good. It's a really powerful film with a powerful
Quite
message.
the argument.
Yeah.
That's great. People have to check it out.
Yeah.
Where are we at? You want to talk about anything else? Do you want to talk about anything else you're doing now? We'll kind of wrap up in a couple minutes.
Changers. Yeah, I mean, just encourage people to, it just takes like one meal to change your mind. The food is delicious. You know, you'll feel better.
Let me ask you this, and then so our guest closes it.
Okay.
So then you can give that camera your eyes and close our sesh.
Okay.
What is what's some of your give me a couple. I don't want 10.
Okay.
A couple of your favorite vegan foods, meals. Not 10. I know you could go on. We're almost out of time. Maybe throw a couple out there that you would want people to try or consider.
What are my favorite foods? I have a lot of favorite foods.
That's why I said not 10. That's the challenge.
I mean, I think one of the
3.
reasons I found so much joy in this career is
3.
I love eating. You know, for me, I find that, you know, my taste buds do crave healthier foods, and when I cook for myself, it's pretty simple. Like, you know, I throw a sweet potato in the oven, I like steam some broccoli, a little like, you know, quinoa, tofu. I eat pretty simply when I cook for myself. But when I go out, you know, I just go on Yelp and type in vegan, and I find, you know, 10 vegan restaurants anywhere around me, and just look for the one with the best reviews. But what I say to other people when they ask me what I eat, I say, you know, what'd you eat for breakfast this morning? What did you have for lunch? Tell me what you had for dinner. And it's just these small tweaks to, take the animal protein out and move plant-based protein in. So, beans are a great place to start. Beans are an amazing source of protein and really what's known as a longevity food.
Lentils.
Lentils.
I had them twice today.
Absolutely. Proud of you, Dr.
They're
Larry.
cheap, too. They're cheap.
Yeah, you'll find that you will probably save, significant amount of money when you move to, cooking your own plant-based meals.
Lentils are so good.
At home, yeah.
Good for you.
And, the Game Changers website, gamechangersmovie.com, has a ton of food resources on there.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so you can go on. We have some incredible chefs that have gathered the best plant-based recipes. So it makes transitioning really, really easy once you know that you need to make this change.
Okay, you get two, you said lentils, two other, but I want to know your favorites.
Okay.
Two others.
If I'm cooking for myself, I'm either going to make Italian food or Mexican food. And, I'm a little bit of a junk food vegan from time to time. And I like simplicity and ease. And I love a brand called Gardein. It's Gardein meatball. So it's made from plants, but indistinguishable from, a meatball made from meat.
A vegan meatball.
It's a meatball, yeah, but it's made from plants. Noodles, pasta sauce, meatballs, and a little bit of like cashew-based Parmesan cheese.
Oh.
And totally delicious, totally easy. I can make a bunch at the beginning of the week and eat through it for the rest of the week. So that's one of my go-to meals.
I'm a little hungry.
I love Italian
That's a good
food.
one. Okay, one more.
Yeah, and then, just like, people always say cheese is the hard thing to give up, and there's a reason for that. Again, going back to that mother cow, breast milk has an opioid in it to encourage, either a human baby or a cow baby to milk from the mother so that it grows, stays alive, and thrives. And if humans are drinking cow's breast milk, we're getting addicted to that opioid, just like a baby cow should if, the milk was being consumed by the baby cow. And so cheese quite literally is an addiction for people. And that's always the thing I hear. Oh, I could totally give up meat. I could totally be vegan except for cheese. I can almost like predict it when it's coming. And the first thing I say is, great. So be a vegan and eat a little bit of cheese when you want to. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. So just having, a lot of understanding with where people are. But in 2019, we have so many incredible plant-based cheese options on the marketplace. Miyoko's cheese, she's known as the queen of vegan cheese. You can find her products in most grocery stores. There's a brand in...
What are these?
These
cheese substitutes, or what are they made out of?
Yeah, they look just like, cheese, all different varieties, but they're made from, cashews, almonds, macadamia nuts.
They're all made from nuts.
Yeah, so
it's like almond milk, except it's a cheese.
Exactly. You can
almond
do,
cheese.
Yogurt, any dairy, based product that you're used to eating from, a cow. You can find that made from nuts and plants, yogurt, ice cream, milk, cheese. It's all out there. And Loca is a brand that I'm really excited about. It's a queso cheese, and it's made from potatoes and carrots and tomatoes. It's so healthy. And you can just go to town on this delicious queso, and you're getting your vegetables in at the same time. So eating is fun. Plant-based eating is fun.
That is good. Those are 3 good ideas for people to try. Especially that pasta sounds good to me.
It's probably about dinner time. You should try some.
Can you tell I'm hungry?
Are you hungry?
Why don't you close us out? Thank you for coming. This was great.
you.
And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
About all of it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think it's an inspiring story. It's really nice to hear your very clear mission and living those deep values. It's great. Good luck with all this stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Game Changers.
Game Changers.
Google it.
Google it.
What
Watch it.
What was that website you went to in high school?
Oh, so many years ago, I couldn't remember. But the website I would send people to today.
No, the search term.
Oh, bovine slime.
No, the other one. Instead of Google.
Interspecies adult breastfeeding.
I forgot I was going to say. Instead of Google it, do the.
Oh, Ask Jeeves it.
Ask Jeeves it. That's what I was going to say.
Thanks, Jeeves, for being my moment. All right. Should I close this out?
I think you should.
Are I good at this camera? Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for working to build a better world. The challenge that I try to give myself every day and give others when given the opportunity is, be a part of building the future that you want to live in. Figure out the world that you need to live in and use your power for good in that direction.
That's the greatest ending I think we've ever had on the show. That's incredible. Is there somewhere you want people to find you? I know you don't have Instagram. Or do you want to just have people go to Game Changers?
If people have questions, find me on LinkedIn, find me on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm on Twitter. I do some social media.
Okay, so Caroline Love on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn.
You can find Caroline Love there, but I really encourage people to check out the film. Those are the real stars.
And check out the Game Changers.
That have incredible followings on Instagram, and maybe one of these days I'll start an Instagram.
Don't
Larry.
do it. I'm telling you to stay out. Thank you for tuning into the show. Please subscribe, share. If you know somebody that's got a great moment, look me up on social media, Dr. Larry Burchett. We will see you next time. That was great.
That was fun.
You can also see that you can track results. You can aim and put a goal and say, look, this is how I'm going to start. I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to beat that person and I'm going to get better.